Okay, Aisha, let's go.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha Williams. I am the R3 Program Manager, and I want to, on behalf of Director Adams and the rest of ICEJA, welcome you all to ICEJA and the first meeting around the grant process for your new award. Congratulations to every single person. Um, this particular award was hugely competitive. We had a number of different organizations to apply for funding for this particular cohort of R3, which really raised the level of the playing field a great deal. So you should be really happy because it means that you all wrote really dynamic proposals, and we're excited to get started as you guys embark on this journey with ICEJA to be able to really get started on all of the awesome plans that you all submitted to R3. Um, so a couple of reminders for today. As Maureen stated earlier, we will be recording each and every one of these trainings and making them available to you. So to ensure that we get a really quality and sound product, we're just asking that you all keep yourselves on mute for the duration of the training. There will be times where we will be stopping for questions. If you have a pressing question, you can put it into the chat box, and we will be pulling questions during the couple of question breaks that we have embedded in the training. Here are some other kind of instructions. If you are new to utilizing WebEx and you've used Zoom before, it is kind of similar in format. There are reaction buttons at the bottom. There's a mute button that's there. There's a raise hand function. If you're not seeing the full screen, there's a button in your upper right hand corner that will allow you to be able to have full screen, which will allow you to be able to see everything on the screen at once. But I am really happy that you are here. The R3 team is excited about the work that we're going to do together. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn it back over to Maureen.
Good morning again. My name is Maureen Brennan. I'm a technical advisor for the R3 program. And you should have received email from me and the invitations to these meetings from me. We're going to do something a little bit different for this training series. We are going to, if someone could mute themselves, please. We are going to be developing a new email address. You'll see it on the screen. It's cja.r3training@illinois.gov. So you'll be receiving the follow-up emails from that address, not from me anymore. But feel free to use that address if you do have any questions outside of what your grant specialist can answer for you, or specifically if you have any questions about the training series. So after every one of the sessions of this new grantee training series, we will be, this address will email you a link to the recording of the session that's just been completed, as well as the PDF of the PowerPoint that we use for that session. And then the email will also summarize some of the key points or reiterate some of the most important information from that session. So watch out for those emails. We can also use this email address if you need to add additional staff members to the invitation list for this series. So our initial invitations went out to whoever was the identified contact person when you submitted your R3 application for funding. So we realized that you may have other staff members, maybe the person that fills out the data report or the person that fills out the fiscal report, that would also benefit from some of the information in this training series. So we would welcome you to give us those contacts as well. to make sure that we have everybody who needs this information is going to receive those invitations and the follow-up emails as well. So if you would use this email address, the CJA R3 training at illinois.gov address, to send us the staff member's name, their role in the grant, and then their email, we'll add them to the contact list for the series. We're doing something a little bit different with this training series. We are going to have the regular track 1, which is basically your introduction to authority grants, but we're adding a second track to give us the opportunity to dig a little deeper into some of the questions that that may have seemed a little challenging to other grantees in the past. So we want to kind of get that information out to you in advance, and hopefully that will answer some of those questions, and it will take away some of the speed bumps to getting your grant executed. So these are the agenda items for today. I believe we will finish right about at 11 o'clock, so we should get you back to your other work. We want to talk about our definition of partnership. We're going to talk about the start date of the agreements, give you a real overview of the grant process, the execution process that is just beginning. We'll talk a little bit about the required reports. We'll highlight some items that need specific prior approval, how to maintain documents, and then a little bit on site visits. And in following sessions in this training series, we'll go into more detail on each of these areas. So we do want, like right in the beginning, we want to talk about how we see R3 grants as partnerships. So our role in this partnership is to kind of help give you the guidelines that are necessary, that we'll work within as we execute and implement your programs. So we're going to be providing you guidance on the financial requirements, specifically those that come through the state's adoption of the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act a number of years ago. We'll be here to provide technical assistance on the legal requirements. We're going to provide guidance as you prepare for audits. I do want to note that the grant staff are not auditors, but we help you prepare for audits. The grant staff will also be dispersing funds within the state guidelines, so we'll be addressing those rules and those requirements in the training series. And we'll also tell you about the site visits that we'll be conducting with each of you. So in order to give you as many resources to help you be successful in the execution and implementation of your grant, you will be assigned a grant specialist to guide you through the grant execution process. So they're going to be your point of contact. And you should have already received an email from the grant specialist that's assigned to your grant. As I said, we're going to have this 2-track training series and the follow-up emails. And new this year, we are also going to be posting the training information and policies and other resources that we discussed throughout the training series. We're going to be using the r3.illinois.gov website to post all of this follow-up information as well. And then, of course, you can always email us at the training address. So let's talk about the start date of your agreement. I think someone needs to mute themselves, please. The start date of the agreement will be November 1st, 2024. That's the earliest start date, the earliest possible start date. But agreements that aren't fully executed by that November 1st date will start on the date of execution. And all of our agreements will end on October 31st, 2025. You're going to see language very much like this in your actual grant agreement. It's going to read something like, this agreement is effective on the latter of November 1st, 2024, or the date of execution, whichever is later, and will expire on October 31st, 2025. Now, if you've had a grant from R3 before, we have in the past allowed pre-award award costs. We've allowed grantees to start incurring costs after the start date that's in their agreement, but before the date of execution. And that really carries a lot of risks because the only cost that
Let's
can
get
be.
together for sure. Hold on, let me put this on.
Can you mute yourself, please?
Sure can.
Aisha, can you mute them, please? So as I was saying, pre-award costs are the period between the start date in the agreement and the date of execution. And there's a lot of risks that come along with that because the only costs that can be reimbursed, that can be covered by the grant, are those that are in the actual approved budget. So by incurring costs before you have an approved budget, that really elevates the risk. And this has caused a lot of problems in the past. So this year, to make it as clean and simple as possible, we won't be allowing any pre-award costs this year. So the start date of your agreement will be either November 1st or the date of execution, whichever is later. Aisha, can we stop here for some questions? Anything in the chat so far?
So far, there are no questions in the chat.
Okay, as we go along, please feel free to use the chat to pose any questions as they come up.
Something just came through.
Yes,
October 30th end date, question mark.
October 31st will be the end of 2025 will be the fixed end date.
Next question. We have not heard from a grant specialist yet.
Okay, if you could just use my email to let me know your agency name, and I'll follow up with them and we'll get you in touch with them right away.
That's it.
Okie doke. So let's talk about the agreement process. Now, as I said, this is like a real quick overview of the process, and we're going to be drilling down on these steps as we go through. Do I see some other questions that came up?
What is the latest of the grant, and why would it send it to a later start date?
What is the latest start date? Will be the date of execution. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go through this, as we review the agreement process.
Are we able to make edits to the budget prior to execution?
Let's go through the agreement process. I think you'll have the answer for that as we go through. So as I said earlier, your assigned grant specialist is your partner in implementing and executing the program. So right now, our focus is getting your agreement executed. As Aisha said, this was really a competitive process. We had a huge number of grant applications that had to be scored and then approved by both the R3 board and the budget committee. There are a lot of steps in the grant execution process, and our goal is to get your agreements executed on or before November 1st, but there are a lot of steps. And so in the event that it's not executed by November 1st, we're going to use that execution date as the start date of your agreement. So your grant specialist will be working really hard with you to get all of the necessary pieces in place and get those agreements executed. But we have 88 agreements that are all getting executed at the same time. So we have a very high volume with R3 grants as well. So if you hear from your grant specialist and they have a question, or if they need some revision or some information, it's really in your best interest to respond as quickly as possible, because it will help us through this execution process as quickly as possible. One thing I want to note is while we used Amplifund for the application and scoring process, the authority isn't totally on board with using Amplifund yet. So while your applications were submitted in Amplifund, we're going to be executing the agreements outside of the Amplifund system. So right now, your grant specialists are reviewing your application materials. Here are the first steps that they're taking. First of all, they have to assure your GATA compliance. And since we don't control GATA, it's really in your best interest to respond to any GATA questions as quickly as possible, so that we can get you approved in GATA. Your grant specialist will be downloading your application materials from Amplifund and putting them in the agreement format. And then they're going to start the review of those materials. So here are all of the different elements of that GATA compliance that they'll be completing, including the completion of and approval of the internal control questionnaire. It has to be approved by the state agency, which has been designated as your cognizant agency, which is typically the agency that has done the most business with you in the past. We are the cognizant agency for a lot of R3 grants because we tend to be the first, for a group of grantees, we tend to be the first state funder. And we also want to make sure that you have elected your indirect cost rate in the GATA portal. So your grant specialist is going to start to review all of your application materials and create the grant agreement. When they've worked with you and they have a good package, they don't have any more questions, anything needing revision, there's all the budget is satisfactory, the narrative is satisfactory, all your GATA compliance is in order, then they're going to be passing it over to both our legal and our fiscal department for their review of those materials as well. And so we won't be able to send you the agreement for execution until we have the sign-offs from both legal and fiscal. And it's going to be your grant specialist who is that point person, as I said. They're going to be the ones that are going to be conveying any necessary revisions to you. So they'll hear from legal and they'll say this needs to change or they have a question about this. It's all going to come through that grant specialist. And so please be responsive when you hear from your grant specialist. So just really quickly, we're going to be looking at to make sure your materials are complete, that they're consistent across both the program description and the budget, that there's no surprises in the budget. We read your program narrative and then we got to the budget and we're like, well, what's that doing there? Which is actually fairly common. They're going to be, asking you questions about how necessary that budget element may be. We want to make sure that the materials clearly articulate the program activity and the costs, and that they all conform to the cost principles and the program guidelines. So most commonly, they're going to be asking for clarifications on grant activity. They're going to be drilling down on the budgeted elements. So there was that question about changes to the budget during this execution phase. Yes, very frequently there are revisions and refinements to that budget as we work toward
where it is.
Can you please mute yourself? There are quite frequently, there are refinements to the budget. But we also have to make sure that the materials are staying within the scope, the original scope that was applied for, because this is a competitive process. So we can't take a big left turn and do something completely different during this execution process. Very commonly, we asked to clarify how cost projections were developed. How'd you come up with this estimate of what that cost will be? And of course, then we have to spend some time on indirect costs if they're going to be charged to the agreement, to specify the basis of the costs and what those indirect costs will be used for. And in the coming weeks, we will have a session that's only on indirect costs. So if this is a new concept to you, please be sure and tune in for that one. So once we have all of these approvals, the grant specialist will notify you that the notice of state award is available for approval in the GATA portal. And you must approve that NOSA in the GATA portal before we can move the grant to the execution stage, before we send it to you for signature. Once you approve the NOSA, your agency signers will each receive an email from the electronic, for their electronic signature of the agreement. We use the DocuSign system where it puts all of the necessary signers at your agency in order. And so you'll each receive an email asking for your electronic signature in the order that your grant specialist defines. And then the final step is after you've approved the NOSA in the GATA portal, we've sent you the actual agreement for electronic signature, and you've returned it. We've got all the signers have done their work. The final step is that grant agreement goes back to legal for one final review before it's submitted to our executive director for her signature, and then it's done. So after the execution of the agreement, you will receive a PDF of the fully executed agreement, as well as links to submit both your periodic financial report and your periodic performance report. And both of those items are subjects of later webinars in this series. So we'll drill down on that information. Okay, so that's the execution process. I think we had some questions in the chat, Aisha.
We have one question. Who are the necessary signers within the agency?
It's always going to be like your chief executive, as well as typically your chief financial officer as well. Someone's not muted. Would you be kind enough to mute yourself, please? Thank you. So it's just really those two signatures are necessary, the chief executive and the chief financial officer. Any other questions?
How long are approvals taking on agreements? And if we do everything we need to do, will it be ready by November 1st?
That's our goal. I think we're about 6 weeks out now, and our goal is to have as many of the agreements signed by November 1st as possible. So that's where that responsiveness really comes into play. As Aisha said, this was a really competitive process. So I think in this pool of 88 that we're getting started now, we have some strong applicants. We have some strong grants. And so I think November 1st is possible, but we have to work in partnership to move all of the process along. Any other questions?
Yes, hi. You mentioned that the Amplifon will not be used for. Hello?
Yolanda, can I ask you to mute yourself and just put your question in the chat?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, you want me to add the question to the chat then?
Yes, please. Would you
Okay.
mind?
Sure.
Thank you. And the reason that we do it, not trying to be totally controlling, it's because we want to have a really solid recording that we can send out to folks. And so it's makes it a simpler process if I just have Aisha pose those questions in the chat.
Okay, question. Will there be a specific discussion on how payments will be paid today?
I don't think we covered that today.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am, is the answer. Not today specifically, but in later trainings, we will dig deeper into payments. However, if you have specific questions about payments, you can direct those questions to your assigned grant specialist. Typically, when will reimbursements be released? We're about to cover that now. And then the last question is, when will the first financial disbursement happen? So there isn't a specific date for when the first financial disbursement will happen. Again, everything is dependent upon the execution process and how long it takes for us to develop a clean product that can be approved by our legal and fiscal team. And so with that, disbursement is dependent upon all of those factors. So having a clean budget having clean objectives, having a clean program plan, and being able to move your documents from phase to phase will determine when you can begin dispersing, but you cannot disperse until after the agreement is signed and solidified. You stated, okay, so Amplifund is not going to be used for reporting
Aisha, I think you cut out there.
as far as the reporting process is concerned. We're about to cover that in the next couple slides. Next question is, at what point is possible budget revisions affected? Can you tell me a little bit more about that in the chat? And is there an advance payment option? Yes, there is an advance payment option that's available. All right.
Should we go ahead with the next slides then, Aisha?
Yes, ma'am. We can move forward.
Okey-doke.
So there are a number of different required reports. So once your grant has been fully executed and you have began to perform the duties that are within your scope of work, there will be certain points in time, either monthly or quarterly, in which you will report back to ICEGM about your activities. So we have two different types of reports that we use. One of them is the periodic financial report, also known as the PFR. And this is your monthly financial report or quarterly, whichever you choose, where you report back all of the items you've expensed against the grant, and it is the form you utilize in order to receive reimbursement for those costs back from the state of Illinois. The second report is your periodic performance report, also known as the PPR. And this particular report is the one in which you utilize to report back on all of the outcomes and deliverables that you all have listed in your application. So this is where you're telling us who you served, how many, what was the purpose, and then what was the outcome, and then any kind of barriers that you all are facing to be able to move your project forward. So the PFR, the periodic financial report, can either be submitted monthly or quarterly, you choose. However, the periodic performance report is submitted every quarter. Now, for you all specifically, your timeline is a little different. There will be 5 periodic performance reports versus 4 because of when your agreements will start. So we'll dig into that a little bit more later and giving you those dates in which those forms are due. However, when either of the 2 forms are due, those reports are submitted to ICEGM no later than 15 days after the period reporting. Meaning, if you are doing the work of November, then your November report will be due by December 15th. If it is a quarterly report and the quarter is 3 months long, it's the 15th after the last month of that quarter. Now, reporting time and effort. So time and effort reports, this is referring to any staff that you all have that are listed as personnel in your budget. We require that you all submit what's called a personnel activity report. We'll call it a PAR for short, and or a time certification. So the difference between the two is how much time the staff are spending working on R3 specific activities. So some of you all may have staff that work on R3, but they may also work on other grants that your organization may have contracted with. And so for the personnel activity report, if you have staff that work on more than one grant, not just R3, and you pay them from more than one grant, then you would have to list how your employee is spending their time. So the personnel activity report will be utilized for all employees that work for your organization that may work on more than one grant. And for your time certifications, these are all submitted on a quarterly basis as well. And your time certifications are filled out for those people who only work on R3. So if you have staff members that are full-time, that are 100% allocated on your budget to R3, then a time certification form is what they will fill out. Timesheets for the staff are all maintained. You all should be maintaining timesheets for them. However, the PAR and the 100% time certification bit about there being, for this particular cohort, 5 quarters versus 4 quarters, which is normal. So our reporting will be November to December, January to March, April to June, July to August, and then October will be its own month of reporting. And our closeout will happen 15 days after the final due date for the last PFR, PPR, or other quarterly report. I can stop there really quickly for questions from the chat.
We had a couple of questions about asking if we can provide the PAR and acceptable time certifications, an example of the timesheets.
Oh, definitely. That information, your grant specialist, bring those specific documents with you throughout the execution process.
And can you please provide an example of a timesheet? I beg your pardon, I just did that one. If the 15th falls on a weekend, is the report due before or after the 15th?
After.
Okay. I had a specific question. Someone asked if these slides will be available after this session. Yes, they will. You're going to receive an email from the cja.r3training@illinois.gov email address with this recording, as well as the PDF of the slides. Here's a question, Aisha. If we don't have personnel, how do we report for subcontractors?
So your subcontractors are under contract as an organization. They are not under contract to ICETA specifically. So regarding subcontractors, it is your responsibility to monitor the work of your contractors. So depending upon what you all have in your linkage agreement or MOU, memorandum of understanding, around how you want your subcontractors to report their time spent on the grant, that would be a conversation, and it is a relationship between you, your organization, and those you contract with. ICEJA wouldn't necessarily have anything to do with how they report that time. However, it is required for you to keep those records and documents of your relationship with your subcontractor. So if you have 1099 employees, for instance, those employees that kind of work project by project with you, then you have to establish how you want them to keep their time. If there is a organization that you are contracting with to help to carry out or perform some of the duties under this grant, there is a whole set of requirements that will cover you around work with. They're considered to be sub awardees versus subcontractors. Any other questions?
Yep. We had Heather wins the prize for close reading of the slides because she found my typo. That reporting period should be July through September 2025, which reports October 15th. Thanks for catching that, Heather. Sorry about that. This is the reporting schedule for the PPR, for the Periodic Performance Report, which is submitted quarterly. Or if you are reporting your financial, your PFR on a quarterly basis, this would be that schedule. Most of our grantees report on a monthly basis, so that one is really easy to figure. It's just 15 days after the end of the period that you're reporting. So if you're reporting for May, then you're reporting, the report is due on June 15th. Let's see. Yes, Michelle said, I thought that the PFR was due between the 1st and the 15th, but by the 15th. Yes, you can certainly submit any of your reports before the 15th. That's the due date, that's the deadline for those reports. Of course, you can report more quickly. Most folks don't have their financial figures all summed up by the end of the period. It takes a little time to do those calculations. So of course you can, anytime between the 1st and the 15th, you can always report early. We won't hold it against you. Someone asked if my contractors are providing training and education to the staff. Would the budget for them go under training and education? Yes, that's true. And those are some of the refinements that I meant when I was talking about the changes that you'll be working with your grant specialist on as we refine your agreement. It's very common that something is classified in one category when it really, according to our rules, really belongs in another. So those are some of the refinements. So let's move on a little bit now, Aisha, because we only have about 20 minutes left. I'm going to save the chat, and if there are any questions that we didn't get to, we'll reach out to you individually with those responses.
Okay. So speaking of due dates are really important. Someone earlier in the chat asked about specifically when dispersals are made, and how soon can they anticipate receiving payment, right? So dispersals are made based off of the periodic financial report that's submitted. So the organization, again, can choose to have this dispersal on a monthly or quarterly basis. It's really up to you as to when you want that to happen. When your PFRs are inaccurate or they're extremely late, that can cause delays in payments or dispersals. And regarding the periodic performance report, that data is normally compiled and we utilize that data and report it back to our executive team in ICEJA, as well as our R3 board. So just letting you know how important it is to really, when you're filling out your periodic performance report, to make the detail very meaty as far as what it is that you are doing to kind of move your projects forward. So we asked you for stories and a lot of narrative information about your grant and what you're doing under your grant and how well your proposal is working on addressing the needs of your community. So The more information on your periodic performance report, the better, because we do take that information back and share with others externally. Slide. So, stop pay list is one of those things that happen when grantees are delayed with sending in all of the necessary reports that ICEJA requests. So the PFR and the PPR are two of the most important reports that a grantee submits into ICEJA. When those are delayed significantly, or an organization does not expense, so you're not sending in a PPR or PFR into the organization, that can have the organization placed on a stop pay list. And a stop pay list is a temporary hold on all monies coming into the organization. And it can impact not just your money coming in from ICEJA, but other state agencies as well. It could impact your ability to apply for funding, because being on the stop pay list is one of those gotta requirements. Not being on the stop pay list is one of those gotta requirements that we referenced in earlier slides. So you just really want to be mindful and cognizant of ensuring that you're getting your various forms in on time to the organization to kind of avoid being placed on stop pay. You also want to maintain your documents, right? So for you all specifically, the rule is that you have to maintain all of your documentation of your work under your contract with the final expenditure report. All of your books need to be kept, your financial records, any supporting documents. This means your attendance sheets for your community engagement events. This means your list of folks that you may give gift cards to for incentives. This includes all of your payroll journals for your staff, and any document related to your contract with ICEJA. In this award, you're required to keep for at least 3 years. So there may be times when we may ask to see certain documents that you all have. At least once a year, ICEJA conducts a site visit. So one of our grant specialists from the R3 team will schedule time with you to come to your site to, just kind of talk about your experience working on this particular grant. We may come during program time to observe some programming. However, in advance, we may ask you to send us certain documents. So making sure that you keep clean records and that they're organized is very important. There could be an audit that happens of your financials. So you want to make sure that you keep tight and right financials as an organization, because ICEJA or our external auditors may request certain documents for you. There are sometimes we utilize documents for program evaluation. So to really talk about the impact of R3 dollars across the state of Illinois, we utilize all of the data that you all send in to us for that purpose. And then we have freedom of information requests from those folks that request certain documents around the grants that we've executed. And so when those requests come in, we may have to ask for additional documentation from our grantees to satisfy this particular request. Now we're going to dig into certain things that ICEJA needs to approve prior to you being able to engage. And this is going to be a short list. So subcontracts. So if you are contracting with somebody externally to help do the work, whether it be a trainer or a person that's your mental health professional or it's a person that does workforce development, or the person that keeps your books, or any of those things, these contractors need prior approval from ICEJA. And we'll talk a little bit about your grant specialist. Really, will talk about with you what that documentation looks like. Earlier, I referenced like MOUs, memorandum of understandings, or different contracts that you have with people. So those are things that need prior approval before you can begin to pay these people on your grant. So just making sure that if you have somebody carrying out a portion of your work in any way, that you have an active contract that's on file that you'll be able to provide to us when requested. If you need to revise your budget for some reason, and you need to make changes or adjustments to staff that are in your budget, positions, or you need to add certain supplies because you forgot to add those supplies, or anything of that nature, then you can submit a budget revision, and ICEJA will take a look at that prior to approval. If you need to amend the agreement for any way, in any way, something major changes within your organization, and you need to make an amendment to the agreement, so you need to change any portion of it, then you would need to get that prior approval from us. If you have any out-of-state travel that you want to have planned, if there are conferences and things that you want to go to, or you want to send your staff to, then you would have to get approval from ICEJA prior, and then publications around, like if you are creating a publication for any reason, then you have to get ICEJA's approval. All right. Side visits. Let's go into those. We'll get your questions. All right. So our grant specialists, again, are your partner in this process, right? They are here to help you to best understand how to do business with the state, how to do business with ICEJA, what the requirements are, and then also ensuring that what you proposed in your program proposal, in your program description, aligns with your budget, as well as making sure that you all are keeping the proper documents that are required for this grant. And so ICEJA staff comes out at least once a year in person, and they kind of sit with you and talk about your experience doing this work on behalf of the state, right? So in advance, those grant specialists may send a list of documents that they ask you to send to them for them to review prior to their visit. They could and should review your programmatic performance, just to have an idea of how well you've been performing the duties that you've outlined in your program proposal, and then your outcomes and deliverables, how well you're doing with those, and how you are in general administering the grant. And so in advance, when we're about to do a site visit, we always send you a letter in advance, letting you know the date, the time, verifying the address, and then sending you a list of documents that we may need to look at prior to that particular visit, and just an overview of what we would be covering. So there wouldn't be a time where you'd be blindsided by a site visit. Slide. So during the site visit, the agenda items are here. So again, you would meet with the staff. We talk about some of your program successes. We'll talk about any barriers that you face to implementing the plan that you've had. And then if there's any technical assistance that you've identified that you need, then we would kind of provide that technical assistance in person, or create an opportunity to provide it to you at a later date. You may meet with some of our administrative staff. We will review those documents that you've provided to us in advance. And then if there are any special conditions or specific conditions that need to be met that aren't being met, then we would outline those for you. Regarding your budget and expensing against the grant, we would review how much you've spent to date and whether or not there is a need, immediate need for a budget revision.
Mhm.
Aisha, did we
And then
lose you?
you did temporarily, but I'm back.
Great.
So we would review your program performance to date and any record keeping, and then, provide you with next steps through a follow-up letter. So every time we do these trainings, we are going to be sending out a survey for you all to fill out. And this survey will help us to best understand how well these meetups are crafted and whether or not there are certain elements that we should be adding into the training series. So you all will receive this link that's on screen that's asking you to fill out a survey at the end of the training. So our next training in the training series on Wednesday, the 25th, allowable costs. So I see that there was a question in the chat that is asking specifically around, what's considered to be allowable costs. And we'll cover executive compensation. So that's this Wednesday, September 25th. And on next Thursday, we'll dig deeper into GATA compliance and then some special conditions. Let's see. All right. There's like 3 questions in the chat that I think I can take really quick before we are due to wrap up at 11 o'clock. So someone asked, will this cohort have working capital advance option available? Any special considerations for cash-strapped organizations? So yes, working capital advance and advance pay options will be available for this cohort. Your grant specialist will work with you to be able to best identify which payment dispersal option is best for your organization. So there's some paperwork that you would have to fill out in order to take advantage of those options, as well as ICEJA will ensure that you have the proper, financial tracking on your side to be able to do well with that payment type. And so, yes, that is an option for you. We'll let you know when you can exercise that. And then Lindsay will go over that cost structure, allowable costs on next week. Budget revision, review and approval. I think the turnaround is about 30 to 45 days. My staff, you can help me with that if I have the wrong date.
But for right now, can I interrupt, Aisha? Budget revisions are revisions to the budget that happen after the execution of the agreement. So if there are some relatively minor changes that need to be made to the budget that you submitted with your application, that should be worked out now during the execution phase of this process. Again, we have to stay within the original scope of the agreement, the application that was submitted, because it's a competitive process. But if you find that there are some refinements that need to be made to the budget that you submitted, that's worked out at this point. Budget revisions happen after the execution of the agreement. And a couple of folks have asked about templates. They want to know their, what data that they should be collecting right now. Each PPR, each periodic performance report, is especially crafted based on the goals, objectives, and performance measures in your agreement. And so our partners in our research department actually create those PPRs, and we'll have a whole session on PPRs a little bit later in the series. Similarly, we'll have a whole session that talks about those dispersal processes and everything that goes into that. We're going to have on track 2, we'll have a special session specifically on the working capital advance, which is available through R3, because it's a slightly more detailed process. And so we're going to have a whole session just on that. But on track 1, we'll have a session that lays out the 3 dispersal options that are available to R3 grantees, though not everybody qualifies for all 3 of those options. But we'll dig into detail about that. We'll also have a session on amendments. We'll have a session on subawards and subcontracts and how they're different. This is just the overview. I'm glad that you have a lot of questions. We're gonna, hopefully through this training series, we're gonna anticipate those questions, and we'll give you all the detail that you need up front. Did I miss any other big questions? The grant closeout, they said October 20, the end date of the agreement is October 31st of 2025, but we are obliged to close out agreements within 45 days of the end date. So your last PFR, your last financial report, is due on November 15th, and your closeout report will be due November 30th. And then we're under the gun to wrap up your grant, to approve those closeouts, and to close out your grant in December. So I think I got to most of the questions. Do you think we've wrapped them all up? I'm going to save the chat and view, and if we missed any important questions, we'll respond to them in the email, in the follow-up email. Should we wrap it up, Aisha?
Yeah. There.
All right, so I'm going to thank you all for joining us. We're looking forward to seeing you next Wednesday and next Thursday. Please use that cja.r3 training email address if you have any questions about the training series, or you have folks that you'd like to add to the invitation list. Thanks for all your time, and we're looking forward to working with you.